Hello, and welcome to this special edition of the IMEO Decision Makers series. I'm Manny Jad, founder and executive director of the Institute for Middle East Options. It is my distinct privilege to welcome Her Excellency, Dr. Varsen Aghabekian Shahin, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the State of Palestine. Good evening, Your Excellency.
Good evening, and very happy to be here. Thank you for hosting me.
Thank you, of course. It's a pleasure of ours. Minister Shahin brings to this conversation a distinguished career spanning academia, institution building, policy development, human rights, negotiations, and diplomacy. This conversation comes at a particularly consequential moment for Palestinians and the wider region. The Middle East is facing a period of profound uncertainty marked by the ongoing Gaza crisis, escalating tensions between Israel, Iran, and the United States, and the growing risk of wider regional spillover. The consequences are being felt far beyond the immediate parties to the conflict, affecting the political calculations, security dynamics, economic stability, and diplomatic engagement across the region. Over the past year, discussions have evolved from urgent efforts to secure ceasefires and address humanitarian needs toward broader debates about political horizons, statehood, governance, reconstruction, and the future architecture of peace in the Middle East. As for Palestine, we have witnessed renewed diplomatic engagement through initiatives such as the France-Saudi process, the high-level international conference on the implementation of the two-state solution, the New York Declaration, and a growing number of proposals concerning Gaza's future governance, recovery, and construction, including discussions surrounding the proposed Board of Peace framework. Taken together, these efforts reflect a growing recognition that the discussion is not only about addressing today's challenges, but also about shaping the political, diplomatic, and institutional realities of tomorrow. For Palestine, this is not only a diplomatic moment, it is also a moment of leadership, institution building, and the difficult choices about the future. And this is precisely why Minister Shahin's perspective is so valuable today. As Foreign Minister, her role sits at the intersection of diplomacy, state building, governance, and representation. Her work on Jerusalem, human rights, institution building, and Palestinian public service offers a unique lens through which to understand not only Palestine's foreign policy priorities, but also the wider political and institutional questions shaping its future. At IMEO, we believe that meaningful dialogue requires more than responding to events as they unfold. It requires space for reflection, strategic thinking, and constructive engagement on the issues that will define the region's future. And that is precisely the purpose of today's conversation. Minister, thank you once again for joining me today. Before we turn to the policy and diplomatic questions, I would like to begin with the journey behind the role. You became both the first woman to serve as Palestine's foreign minister and the first Palestinian of Armenian heritage to hold a ministerial position. Looking back, what were some of the key experiences or turning points that have shaped your path into public service and ultimately led you to your current role?
That's a very good opening question because you are what your background is. And my background is from an Armenian origin. Both of my parents are Armenian. I was born in this area. I was raised as an oppressed and occupied Palestinian, and I am Christian by religion, and I am Arabized by culture. So that mix really makes me who I am today. And I am very much a Palestinian, although I have Armenian blood in my veins, but I'm a Palestinian who has been living the plight of Palestinians all my life. And as such, I'm a person who has been striving to liberate myself as an occupied, suffocated person and try to use mechanisms that would enable me to contribute to the liberation of my nation, my people, the Palestinians. So that background is important because it has given me an exposure to various things that maybe other people are not exposed to. My educational background also has exposed me to the world outside, and the opportunities and the jobs that I have been engaged in helped me to shape my outlook towards a future of a free Palestine. I worked in human rights, I worked in policy making, I worked in strategic planning, I've done research, I've worked as an academician. So there is a lot of a mix of experiences that brought me to where I am today.
Thank you. That is really seriously inspiring, especially hearing it from you. And as being a Middle Eastern woman myself, I'm inspired. And understanding the journey behind the role also helps us better understand the perspectives behind the decisions. Minister, you assumed this role at a time when the region was already experiencing significant geopolitical change, a period that has since been shaped by the war in Gaza, shifting regional dynamics, and the recent escalation involving Israel, Iran, and the United States. Against this backdrop, how is Palestine positioning itself diplomatically today? And what objectives is Palestinian diplomacy seeking to advance in this rapidly evolving environment?
What we have been facing for 8 decades now is an ongoing oppression of a nation, displacing people, occupying their land, and for another country, state, claiming that land to be its own. And this displacement and oppression has never stopped. It has intensified in certain periods, but it has started in 1947-48 with the division of Palestine, and before that, with the Balfour Declaration and all the steps that were taken before we reached the division of Palestine. So the oppression of Palestinians has been ongoing. Today, the oppression has intensified because any conflict in the region, any escalation in the region, and we have seen it in the last few months with the Israel-USA-Iran war, diverts attention from the core issue in the Middle East, which is that of the Palestinian problem and the Israeli occupation of Palestine. However, despite that short period where this attention is diverted, the issue of Palestine remains a core issue. Because without a solution to the Palestinian problem, you can solve problems elsewhere in the region, but this will remain as a thorn on the table that needs to be resolved. If we need security in the region and beyond the region, the issue of the Palestinian problem, which is that of occupation, which is the source of many ailments in the region, has to be solved. And as such, as a Palestinian who works in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we need to continue pushing with countries of the world to say just that, to say if you are for international law and you want to comply with international law, and that international law applies equally to everyone around the globe, then you need to go by what international law says. And international law is very clear today about Palestine. Palestine on the borders of the 1967, the land that was occupied in 1967, is not a contested land. It's an occupied land. This is very clear in international law. It was reaffirmed in the ICJ ruling of 2024. ICJ said it's not a contested land, it's an occupied land, and this occupation needs to be dismantled. And as such, we need to work towards the dismantlement of the occupation. We need to work towards more recognition of the state of Palestine, because that recognition gives the state of Palestine its legal power. It positions it legally as a state in the world arena, and it is irreversible. Any recognition is irreversible. You recognize that that's it. That recognition cannot be taken away. And today we are seeing more and more countries recognizing. We have seen 20 countries recognizing in the last 2.5 years, and we hope to see more countries recognizing. We need to continue highlighting violations by an occupier state against the oppressed and the occupied people. And again, these violations are intensifying by the day.
What I find particularly interesting is your emphasis on the gap between international support in principle and implementation in practice. We continue to hear strong diplomatic language around a two-state solution, recognition, and peace, yet translating those commitments into political realities remains an ongoing challenge. Where do you go from there? The realities on the ground versus what the world is seeing. I think that's been a challenge not only for Palestine, but also for the rest of the region as well. But let's move to the next question. Despite continued international support for the two-state solution, I would like to ask you about its viability given developments on the ground. How does the Palestinian leadership approach this debate, and what does diplomatic or political steps are necessary to move from international endorsement, again, to practical implementation?
I get this question all the time.
Yes.
And I keep saying, and I want to emphasize that the only viable solution is the two-state solution. There are other solutions. I mean, we can continue the status quo. But who would want to continue living under occupation, under a genocide in Gaza, under Israel waging wars all the time, with our insecurities normalized for a long time? I don't think anybody would embrace that occupation or the continuation of that occupation. We would continue maybe living in an apartheid state. Today we are living in an apartheid state, and very frankly, there is no place for apartheid in the 21st century. I mean, no one would want to continue living under apartheid, and we will continue fighting that apartheid. Israel has the power to institute and embolden that system, maybe today, but in the long run, it cannot. This is not sustainable. We can opt for a one state. I mean, we have no issue with a one state for all of its citizens. If Israel is ready to have a one state, one democratic state, where Palestinians and Israelis, Muslims, Christians, Jews coexist and have equal rights, I don't think we have a problem with that. But practically speaking, if Israel has lots of problems with the two states, whereby, you have Israel and you have Palestine, it will never accept a one state for all of its citizens. It will maybe accept a one state where we are second class or third class citizens, but we will not accept that. So the most viable, despite all the challenges today, and we can talk about the challenges, is the two-state solution. And as such, I think the whole world has realized that, because the New York Declaration that was signed last year in New York, and it had 143 countries rallying behind it and endorsed it, talks about just that, the two states, and how we reach from where we are today to the materialization of the second state, because the first state is already there. Now we need to help materialize the second state. So we have the New York Declaration that delineated in 42 items very carefully what needs to be done by all states who have rallied behind it so that the second state materializes. It talked about Gaza. It talked about the narrative of peace, the economy of Palestine, the strengthening of the Palestinian Authority, the settlements and the settlers, security issues, you name it, it's in that document. So we need to take that and move on with it. We also have the Global Alliance for the materialization of the two states. Again, about 93 countries and international organizations are behind the Global Alliance, and we have meetings, regular meetings on the issue. It is also tied and feeds into the New York Declaration. So there is move on the international arena towards the two-state solution.
I agree with the two-state solution, but if I can just ask you, what if that doesn't happen? What if the conditions you outline remain difficult to achieve in the near term. Like, what are the next diplomatic steps? What's the alternative plan? What's, for lack of a better word, what's plan B if a two-state solution is not viable and a one-state solution isn't viable? Where do we go? Have there been discussions about what would happen if either outcome just does not work?
I think that question should be directed to the Israeli side. Because as Palestinians, we're already living in a reality of apartheid and occupation. And we will not accept that. We will continue fighting as per international law to get our rights as enshrined in international law. We're not asking anything above international law. Today, Israel is committing crimes and violating international law. It is Israel's responsibility to start acting as a state that abides by international law, complies with international law, and acts as a normal state in the region. Because today, Israel is not a normal state in the region, because normal states don't commit genocides, don't continue a belligerent occupation of another people, don't institute an apartheid system, don't wage wars on neighboring countries, don't oppress the people under occupation, because even people under occupation have rights under international humanitarian law and under international law. And Israel has been violating Palestinian rights left and right. I mean, in whatever sector you can think of, our rights are violated. So the question is for Israel. If Israel wants to be secure and wants to live in security and peace in the area, it needs to think of the security and the needs of its neighbors that it has been occupying for decades now. The plan is to focus on the rights of the Palestinians as enshrined in international law. And we have a right to self-determination. And what we want as Palestinians is to materialize our state on the 1967 borders. That's not much to ask. We have already made the greatest concession in the history of the Palestinians when we conceded 78% of historic Palestine to the State of Israel, and we have recognized the State of Israel. We just want to live in peace and security next to the State of Israel and the region as a whole. And that will not happen without respecting the rights of the Palestinians as enshrined in international law.
Thank you. I hear you. Minister, much of the international discussion focuses on diplomacy, recognition, and regional dynamics. But internally, the Palestinian leadership is also navigating significant political, economic, and institutional pressures alongside the continued geographic division between the West Bank and Gaza. How does the Palestinian Authority approach these interconnected challenges at this moment?
Look, the division, the internal political division is something that we need to deal with. We acknowledge that, and there are allies and mediators who are working on this, but in the final analysis, if we want to present ourselves to the world as one country, we need to work on one state, one weapon, one administration, one constitution, one set of rules, etc., etc. So that's something we acknowledge and we're working on it. However, Israel today undermines our existence demographically, geographically, and financially. And I'm sure you're following up what is happening geographically, because the annexation and the grabbing of Palestinian land has been continuous. And it has intensified in 2026. Only today, I heard about over 2,000 new units announced. Thousands of Palestinian dunums have been confiscated, only to embolden this settlement and settler enterprise. The settlements and the settlement enterprise is part and parcel of the Israeli policy on annexing as much Palestinian land as possible. And today they use the settler population as an arm to help them in annexing more land. So we are undermined geographically by the grab of land and the build up of more settlements and the increasing settler population. if we look at 1990s, for example, we had, let's say, 150 settlements. Today, we have around 200 illegal settlements in occupied Palestinian land and over 300 outposts. They are all illegal as per international law. If we had 30 settlements, now 300. If we had 150 settlers in the mid-1990s, today we have close to 800,000 settlers.
Mm-hmm.
So we acknowledge that that things have changed on the ground. And many people ask me, what will happen to Israeli settlers if negotiations resume and there is a state of Palestine? And to me, the answer is very simple. Because in 1947-48, 750,000 Palestinians were made refugees. They were forced to leave what became Israel proper. And many of them are still, until today, refugees in many countries in the region. And some of them have opted to go to Europe or the United States. That was considered okay at the time, 750,000. It should be also okay to take out illegal settlers who are sitting on stolen Palestinian land, the same number, almost, to go back to Israel proper, because these people were incentivized to come and reside in occupied land, to expand this settlement enterprise. They can be incentivized to go back. So we have the undermining geographically, we have the undermining demographically, and today an additional component of undermining financially. Today, Israel has withheld our tax money for years now. It started withholding money since 2021, and for the last 14 months, we have not received any of our tax money, zero. And you can imagine, if you are a government like us under occupation, you have no control over your resources. Your natural resources are exploited. You have no control over your entry points with other countries, for example, Jordan, Egypt. You have a settler population that is so violent in occupied land. You cannot meet the basic needs of your people. You are asked to do so many reforms as if you are living in luxury and you are a normal government and a normal state, and you continue functioning. Even the strongest of the governments with a stable environment cannot do that. This tax money covers 65% of public expenditures monthly. And we're deprived of that money and have been for the last 14 months with zero money coming in. And we still continue living. Why? Because our people are adamant to stay steadfast in their ancestral land. They know we've experienced refuge in 1947-48, and we know what that means to a Palestinian to become refugee. We will not do it again. People now are paid 30, 40, 50% of their salaries, and they continue to survive. We don't know until when, but we are sure that our people are resilient enough to steadfast.
Where are the, going back to the settlers, where are the Palestinians that are being taken out of their homes? Where are they going?
Well, settlements are erected on land that is confiscated by several means, and it becomes allotted to the Israeli settlers.
Okay.
If there are people on that land, they are kicked from that land, like the Bedouin communities that are kicked all the time. Now they are using another method, which is attacking refugee camps. And we know that several refugee camps in the northern part of Palestine have been attacked in the last 2 years, like Tulkarem, Jenin, Nur Shams. And people from those camps became refugees again, because people who live in the camps are refugees from the villages that they were displaced from in Israel proper. So now they are refugees for a second or a third time.
But where are they moving to? Yani?
They are moving to areas that are highly populated, to Palestinian villages and cities. For example, from Tulkarem, they moved to Tulkarem city, or they moved to Nablus because it's a nearby city. Now, the major problem is in Gaza, because 2.3 million people, all of them have been displaced internally, once, twice, three times, many times. Today, what Israel is doing is, and saying it very openly, is that they want to move their occupation in Gaza to 70% of Gaza. 70% of Gaza. And if you know the geography and the size of Gaza, you would know that Gaza is very small. Gaza is 365 square kilometers. And that 365 square kilometers used to house the 2.3 million Gazans, which means we had some 6,000 Gazans per square kilometer. And that was one of the most densely populated areas in the world. Today, if those people are pushed to be in the 30% of Gaza, which means 100 and some, 25 probably square kilometers, it means that we are having 18,000 Gazans per square kilometer. If 6,000 was the most highly populated, 18,000 is 3 times the 6,000. And you can imagine that crowdedness with 2.5 years of genocide, with no basic services, with people living in tents, with the fires eating up tents, with the adverse weather conditions, with thousands of children out of schools, with rodents and rats eating people's fingers and ears, with no clean water, with no food, with no shelter. What does that mean? And this is the question that people need to ask. Why do we need to get to this stage? And where is our humanity? I mean, the world has seen this aggression on Gaza unfolding for 2.5 years and continues to see the killing and destruction in Gaza. And if it's not time now to stop this, to oblige an occupier state to stop its violation, to stop its occupation, when is the opportune time?
I wish I had the answer. I really do. People see what's happening in Gaza, the international community, and especially the online community. But tell me about what is life like in the West Bank right now, since the crisis has started there?
Well, the situation is also of a lot of concern, because since October 2023, over 1,100 people have been killed on the West Bank. We had 12,666 injured, and we had 7,154 settler attacks in the West Bank. I mean, it's one thing to have a genocide in Gaza, but it's another thing to see what is happening on the West Bank. And 35 people have been killed by settlers. Settlers who carry weapons have killed 35 people in the last 2.5 years, 16 of them killed in 2026. So the number is spiking. Maybe people would say 16 is not a large number, but these 16 people are killed by illegal settlers who terrorize Palestinian lives 24 hours a day. These settlers are armed. These settlers are emboldened by settlement leaders. They are weaponed and emboldened by settler ministers in the Israeli government, who are settlers themselves, and they are unleashed. And today we see them committing crimes against the Palestinians left and right. I mean, almost every day there is more than one incident of settler attack, and nobody is stopping them because often the Israeli occupation forces support them. They are called, they watch, and do nothing. And you rarely hear of any settler who has been charged with anything. So if settlers can continue to do that, and we are supposed to stay calm, because if we dare to retaliate, even with a stone, then in the eyes of Israel and the world, we become the terrorists. The occupation is forgotten. The illegality of the settlements and the settlers is put aside, and we become the ones who are terrorizing the illegal settlers. So the situation is extremely, extremely difficult.
Is there any daily communication with the current Israeli government, between the PA and the Israeli government?
Well, there is what we call a civil coordination, because anything we should be doing needs permission. I mean, if we want to move from one area to the other, we need permission. If we want to transport patients to, for example, hospitals in Jerusalem, we need permission. If we want to go abroad, we need permission. So that kind of coordination needs to stay, because if we breathe, we need permission from the Israelis. But on the political level, in terms of negotiations, no, there is no such engagement.
May I ask, when was the last time there was ongoing engagement with the Israeli government on the political level?
If we look at the negotiations for the last 10 years, there hasn't been any serious negotiations. The last was with the Kerry shuttle diplomacy in the Obama time, but after that, there have been nothing serious in terms of negotiations.
So in light of recent developments, do you believe the Palestinian issue has reemerged as a central factor in regional diplomacy? And has the current momentum changed assumptions that normalization and regional integration could move forward independently of a meaningful progress on the Palestinian question? Recent public polling in several countries suggests growing sympathy toward Palestinians, particularly among the younger generation. Do you see this as a temporary reaction to the current events in the Middle East, or as a part of a deeper generational and political shift internationally?
I think the political shift is happening, but we need to amplify it and we need to maintain it. Because as human beings, we tend to forget. But you cannot really unseen the scene. What people have seen in terms of what was happening in Gaza and with this ongoing occupation cannot be erased from the memory. And today people are questioning how much longer this occupation can be sustained and how much longer the blind support to an occupier state can continue, and to a state that is consistently violating international law. So if you look at the polls in the United States, for example, and you look at the polls in the Republican Party amongst the younger generation, those who are under 35, those who are not the second, third generation American Jews, for example, that do not have the same ideas their parents or the direct Holocaust survivors had. And they are looking at things in a different manner, and they are exposed more to what is happening in the world and to the myths that many of us were grown up with. I mean, people are fed a narrative that needs to be questioned today. I mean, the land for a people without, let me get this right, a land without a people for a people without a land. I mean, everybody knows today that it is a myth. I mean, it's no longer, it doesn't hold much water, because the Palestinian narrative is now very clear. You have a lot of publications that has been disseminated that shows that this land was prospering. This land had much more than what others in the region had at the time. We had theaters, we had a railway, we had schools, we had colleges, we had hospitals, we had educated people. So that is really a myth. And today they are hearing more and more the aspirations of Israel of not only occupying the land of Palestine, but moving beyond the land of Palestine. Israel says it very clearly that it wants to infringe on the territorial integrity of neighboring states, which means it will wage wars on 6-7 countries to establish its greater Israel, because it says it wants to take chunks of Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, even reaching parts of Turkey. Mm-hmm. So that kind of mentality is sending a very, very strong message that this cannot continue. And this narrative should be challenged by all.
I would be remiss not to ask about Hamas, about October 7th. As an international actor, how do you explain that incident compared to what's happening on the ground now? Was the reaction to October 7th far exceeds what has happened on the ground in Gaza today?
First of all, we need to look at October 7th in a broader context. Mm-hmm. I mean, we did not wake up to find what happened in October 7th as a surprise. October 7th is a culmination of years of oppression, of violations of rights, of caging people in an open-air prison for 20 years, of suppression of all kinds, of no light at the end of the tunnel, people not seeing a future. But it was violent. Yes, it was violent. I mean, what happened in October 7th was very violent. We acknowledge that. But the retaliation after October 7th is way, way beyond. I mean, it's disproportional. What happened is a crime of the crimes. I mean, killing 76,000 people, injuring 176, having people still missing, detaining 23,000 Palestinians during the genocide period. I mean, destroying all of the infrastructure, destroying the environment, the schools, the cultural centers, mosques, churches. You cannot justify by any means this kind of a response.
Thank you for insight, Minister. I would like to take our conversation a step further and explore what kind of institutions and governance framework are needed to transform any political progress in a sustainable long-term reality. When you think about the future, what does the Palestinian governance look like? And what institutional foundations are needed to achieve it? If you were starting, and some would say, a lot of people would say you're starting at ground zero. What's needed to achieve? What happens the day after? That's the term that everybody talks about, the day after.
The day after should come after dealing with what we are living in today. I mean, correct. How could I think of a day after where I have to grapple with all the impediments and the challenges that we are living under today, with undermining the Palestinian Authority, with continuing this occupation, with decreasing our funding, with increasing violations. I mean, it's very hard to really think of the day after. But as Palestinians, we know that that day after will come, that our liberation is inevitable. And as such, we need to be ready for that day after. When we think of Palestine, we think of a democratic Palestine. If you look at the Palestine Liberation Organization, this organization has exercised democratic practices since its establishment. I mean, in 1964, we were more democratic than any other entity in the region. I mean, our leaders were elected on democratic principles, and we continued to be so. People ask us now, but you don't have elections now. And the response is also simple. How can we have elections, democratic elections, when Gaza is severed? Today it is under still a genocidal attack. Jerusalem is out of reach. Israel would not allow Palestinians of Jerusalem to engage or participate in elections. And we have so many impediments on the West Bank. Is this an opportune time to have widespread elections? No. But despite that, we have had elections. We have elections of the lawyers syndicate, for example, the health workers syndicates, the medical organization. We've had local governance elections. We had youth elections. We had Fatah elections. So we know how to conduct elections. And we have conducted elections in 1996 and 2006. And we had international monitors who were here monitoring the elections. And they affirmed that the elections went smoothly and there were no problems with the exercising of our rights towards elections. We can do elections, but we need to have the conducive environment to be able to do that. And President Abbas has ensured that we will conduct presidential elections and Palestine Legislative Council elections when the environment is conducive, a year after there is a complete ceasefire, and the Jerusalemites are able to elect. The Jerusalemites under international law are residing in occupied territory. Although Israel says that East Jerusalem is united with West Jerusalem and it is the eternal capital of Israel, Israel can say whatever it wants. And it does say whatever it wants because it can say whatever it wants and do whatever it wants because of the impunity it's granted. But international law is clear about East Jerusalem. And East Jerusalemites, as Palestinians under occupation, should be able to participate in the elections. It's now the ball is in the court of Israel and the international community to say, look, we want Palestinian elections, but we want it on the entirety of the occupied Palestinian territory. Today we call the occupied state of Palestine, which means the Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. Today we have also reviewed our constitution, and we have the constitution that enables us to look at the entirety of Palestine and the oneness of Palestine and ensure that the rights of all people in Palestine are secured. So we're moving, despite of all the challenges, we're moving. We're moving with the building of our institutions. I mean, even with all the impediments I mentioned in terms of the lack of money and the finances, we are trying to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of our institutions, the way we deal with the money that is available, the way we improve the delivery of services, whether in education, in health, in water, in electricity, and so forth. So we are trying our best, but as I said, we have so many impediments that push us back. We go a step forward and go back 2 steps backward, but we continue.
I hear what you mentioned legitimacy and institutional trust. How difficult is it to strengthen institutions while some Palestinians, if not all, if not most, I'm sorry, not all, find themselves debating and having questions of political representation and renewal?
Look, whenever you have an authority that is undermined and systematically undermined to be crushed, its reputation will be undermined because I'm in the government and I know that we cannot meet the basic needs of our people. We try our best, but our people deserve a lot more, especially in Gaza and on the West Bank. And if we can't deliver that, people will continue to think negatively of this authority. For this authority to build trust, it needs to be able to meet the needs of its people. For this authority to build trust, it needs to show the people that the non-violent way will bring peace. Because people are looking at the leadership and saying, you know, you espouse non-violence, And for 35 years, we haven't seen anything but more emboldening of the occupation. So your nonviolence track is not working. But we also know that the violent track and the military route is not working either.
Yes.
So for me and for the leadership, first and foremost, we need to ensure that the people are alive in Palestine, not dead in Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's very difficult, and I see it with my children. My children look at me and say, you keep talking, but your talking is getting us nowhere. And I keep saying that, yes, but that talking will bring us somewhere sometime. You don't see it now, but eventually it will happen. But if we take the violent route and end up all crushed and all of our infrastructure destroyed, where will that take us?
Mm-hmm. Does the PA envision a place where Gaza would be part of the PA at some point?
I think that's the main thing. I mean, the PA thinks of the entirety. It's one Palestine. And Gaza is part and parcel of that Palestine, and it's indivisible. It cannot be separated. It's inseparable from the entirety of Palestine. That's why we keep calling on the oneness. And that's why the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, is telling the world that if you want to bring back Gaza to the oneness of Palestine, the Palestinian Authority needs to be engaged in whatever happens in the day after in Gaza from the very beginning. Not in the middle, not at the end. Because if you want to create one system, one state, one administration, one weapon, the oneness of everything, you need to have the core engaged from the very beginning.
Let's pull back for a moment and discuss the proposed Board of Peace framework, which has generated considerable discussion regarding the future governance and reconstruction of Gaza. How does the Palestinian leadership assess these proposals, and what principles would determine whether any future governance is compatible with the Palestinian sovereignty, legitimacy, and long-term state-building objectives? And related to that, I would also be interested to hear more about the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. What does that effort stand? Where does that effort stand today? And how does it fit into the Palestinian leadership's broader vision for governance and reconstruction?
Okay. At the outset, we have embraced the peace agreement that was signed in Sharm el-Sheikh, because our first and foremost priority was to save lives and to save the bleeding in Gaza. And we could not have said no to any peace venture. So if that peace agreement brought us a ceasefire, then we embraced it and we welcomed it with open arms. But today, if you look at Gaza, 8 months after the agreement was signed last October, and the establishment of the Board of Peace and the National Committee, we need to look at what is happening in Gaza today. What is happening in Gaza today, after the peace agreement was signed, is that we have almost 1,000 people killed after the agreement was signed. We have 3 times that number people injured. The humanitarian assistance don't enter to the extent that it was supposed to enter. It is entering, but not to the extent that the devastated population needs. Students are still out of regular schooling. The Rafah border crossing is almost closed. It is partially open for a very minimum number of people going in and out, much, much less than what was agreed upon. The International Stabilization Force has not started its work in Gaza. The National Committee was established, but the National Committee is acting remotely. You need a National Committee in Gaza. So we are really stuck in phase 1 of that proposal or the agreement. And we cannot move to phase 2 until we go clean from phase 1 to phase 2. What we as Palestinian Authority and the PLO is saying is that there's this agreement. There are phases to this agreement. There are items in each phase. And the guarantors of this agreement need to put checks and balances to
Mhm.
ensure that all parties that have agreed to this agreement go by what they have agreed to, whether it's Hamas, whether it's the Israelis. I mean, one of the main conditions is Israeli withdrawal. Israel is telling us very clearly, I don't want to withdraw, I want to expand the occupation in
Mhm.
Gaza from 50% of Gaza to 54% to 60 to 69, now 70%. It's voicing it very clearly. So how do we break this stalemate? The stalemate needs to be broken by a very firm, stringent, serious, time-bound frame that puts all the parties into account. And whoever is violating is put to account. The National Committee cannot continue, it cannot work from Egypt.
Yes.
They are very credible people who need to be on the ground. The people have to see them. They have to interact with the people. But this committee cannot work in isolation because we need it to be tied with the West Bank, the core. The core is West Bank. And for that purpose, it was agreed to have a liaison office now at the Prime Minister's office that would liaise with this committee probably on a daily basis, because if we talk about education, health, water, I mean, all issues are tied. But until the committee is allowed to be in Gaza, we're not seeing any serious effort in Gaza.
Let's step back and look at the region as a whole. It is clear that the challenges we are discussing are deeply interconnected. From a Palestinian perspective, what would it take to achieve a broader and more sustainable peace in the Middle East? And what conditions are necessary to ensure that such peace can endure?
One of the basic ingredients for forging peace is a genuine intent by all parties towards a genuine peace process. Palestinians have genuinely said that they want peace. In 1988, they recognized Israel and they said, we're going to move in a nonviolent track and we want to go into a peace process. Israel does not mean peace. Israel does not want peace because everything Israel did in the mid-90s onwards is violations of what has been agreed upon in Oslo. Every item in Oslo agreement was violated by Israel unilaterally. And when Palestinians decided that if Israel is defying the Oslo process, violating all items, we need to follow a peaceful track, which includes the international mechanisms. So we internationalized our issue, our case, and we took it to the international courts. We use all international platforms, human rights platforms, the UN Security Council, etc., etc. And Israel says, but you know what? This is unilateral violation by the State of Palestine. We are unilaterally violating the terms of the agreement, forgetting that Israel violated all the terms of that agreement and left us with nothing but to go and resort to international law, because international law needs to stay as our compass. Albeit international law today is under a lot of threat, but we continue to say that a world with a threatened international law is better than a world without international law, because a world without international law would mean that the stronger will devour the weaker. And it will mean that a state that is above the law will continue to eat up the weaker, the Palestinians, because it knows it is supported and it can. So we continue working with our international partners, and this is why we ventured into the Global Alliance, the New York Declaration, and so forth. The other thing you asked me about is the normalization. Today, I think normalization is an issue that is not palatable by anybody. And so Arabia, for example, is saying it very clearly. We will not normalize until there is a movement on the political track towards statehood in Palestine. And Saudi Arabia is one of the weightiest countries in the region, and it has a voice worldwide. And we need to continue to amplify that approach, because it's very important that no normalization occurs without that political track. And we know that most of the Islamic countries are also against the normalization if there is no move on the statehood issue for Palestinians.
Does that give you hope that a two-state solution or a one-state solution or any other viable option could be a reality in the near future?
I have to stay hopeful, and we need to keep instilling that hope, because if we lose hope as Palestinians, we will go into despair. Life is not rosy. We know there are lots of challenges, but we also know that the status quo is not sustainable. One day things will change. And today the world is really changing. The world is looking at what is happening in the Middle East and saying, you know what, this is a belligerent occupation that really needs to end. Because these Palestinians who have been suffering under occupation for almost 8 decades now deserve self-determination, because they're not asking for anything above the law. And if Israel wants to prosper, and we want it to prosper, we want to live next to a neighbor that is prospering, because its prosperity will transcend in one way or another to our people. Our people used to work in Israel. I mean, but Israel cannot prosper if we are in pain and if we continue to be occupied, because people will not embrace occupation, will not accept it no matter what, and will fight it. So let's continue struggling, at least against this occupation, non-violently, because we want our people to stay alive in Palestine and enjoy a liberated Palestine in the future.
How do you ease the questions from Israelis that say a two-state solution would mean their safety would be at risk, their physical safety, there'd be more bombings or more terrorist attacks or so? I mean, I think that's the main question that most Israelis would have, is how do you safeguard the safety of Israel in a two-state solution existence?
But the question that needs to be asked is, Israel is experiencing being an occupier state, and as such, it is insecure, and it will continue to be insecure. It has not experienced two states living in peace and security next to each other. It needs to move towards that direction to see if things would be different. If it continues with the approach of an occupier occupying somebody else's land, of an oppressor oppressing the other, of hegemony of one people over the other, of supremacy of one race over the other, it will invariably stay insecure. It needs to come out of this mindset and say, if I have people who want to live in peace and security, I need to give them some sense and hope towards that peace of security. That hope doesn't come from more wars, from a genocide, from more oppression, from settler violence. It needs to change course. And it, as I said, it will not be secure if its neighbors are not secure. That's, we know this from history. We know that people don't accept occupation, period.
Throughout this conversation, we have discussed diplomacy, governance, statehood, and the future. I want to end by looking at the next generation. Minister, we cannot end the conversation without looking toward the next generation. What message would you like to leave for young Palestinians, for your kids, future grandkids, inshallah, for young people across the region as they navigate the challenges and responsibilities of shaping the Middle East's future?
I would like to say that it's important that we embrace humanity And we embrace a world that is governed by law. And we don't lose hope and go into despair despite all the challenges, because desperation would lead to more desperation and would lead people to do things that will bring more disaster at times than create avenues for a better future. That better future will come. It needs patience. I know it's very difficult. I know our people don't see that light at the end of the tunnel. We need to create that light, whether it's in the middle of the tunnel or at the end of the tunnel. But we need to give the spark to that light. And as Palestinians, we are resilient people. We are people who are very well educated. We have contributed beautifully to the region and to the world. And we need to be given space and time to contribute to building our own country. Our own country deserves that. Our people deserve that. And we know that we will be always contributors to the world.
Minister, thank you for your thoughtful engagement today. The issues we discussed, from shifting regional alliances to the challenges of governance, state building, remind us that navigating this period requires moving beyond slogans and surface level analysis. It requires confronting difficult realities while continuing to search for a viable political path forward. At moments such as these, meaningful dialogue becomes more difficult, but more necessary. Yet it is precisely during the periods of uncertainty, conflict, and transition that conversations like this matter the most. At the heart of these discussions, and let's remember this, are people. Behind every policy debate, diplomatic initiative, governance proposal, or political processes are individuals, families, and communities whose lives are directly affected by the decisions made today. That is exactly why IMEO exists. We believe that sustainable peace requires rigorous analysis, serious dialogue, and platforms that bring the architects of the region's future directly into the conversation. We cannot simply react to the Middle East. We must also think strategically about its future. To our audience of policymakers, diplomats, researchers, and practitioners, thank you for watching or listening to this special edition of the IMEO Decision Makers series. With that, we bring this high-level conversation to a close. Minister, I can't thank you enough for taking this time. And with that, I bring this discussion to an end. Goodbye.
Goodbye.